Hey guys, how's it going? Today we are back with another Let's Color Grade, and now it's episode 9. I did a reel the other day with a pretty nice color grade and I got a lot of comments on it, so I thought why not break it down, what I did and how it came to look like it did. I made some cool techniques in this one, so I thought why not break it down and make it a fun grade as well. So for the first portion of this video, I'm just going to break down what we did, kind of for me to remember as well. How I did it, and then we're jumping into the clip and then starting to actually color grade the clip as well. So let's just jump into Davinci Resolve and get started. All right guys, so you just saw the clip and this is what we have done. So if I just kind of break it down into small pieces, let's just remove most of what's going on down here. All right, so now we just have the color space transformed going on. If you've seen my video on the best kind of color space, then I'm converting it from Cinema Gamut and Canon CLOG3, which is what my camera shoots in, to Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. And then for the last color space transform, it converts from Davinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate to Rec.709 and Gamut 2.4. Why is that? Short explanation. Now we're working inside Davinci Wide Gamut. This color space, everything that happens between these two nodes are inside that color space. You can just convert your log footage here and then into Rec.709. So basically taking the first two steps of this one and putting it into the other one. But then if I'm only working with Canon footage, that's great. If I'm working, as I am, with both drone footage and Canon footage, then it's great to have this color space, because then I know that all the colors will work the same as soon as they're inside of this, as all the colors from the different inputs will be converted into the Davinci Wide Gamut and then out to Rec.709 as well. So that's essentially why I'm doing that. I've just converted my log footage. It went from looking like this is the pure log image, to this is Wide Gamut and then Rec.709. So that's basically it. I have some videos on Rec.709 and Wide Gamut if you want to watch those, but for this one we'll just grade it. So the first thing I did, even though it's node 5, was to add some contrast. We've done that with this curve here. Then I changed my exposure settings to make it a little bit nicer. I changed the temperature a little bit to make it a little bit more green, because I thought it was too magenta. So made it a little bit more green, did that in the primaries here. And then I added some color separation with the curves in here. We did some changes to the primaries in here. Just kind of warmed up the gamma a little bit and then made it more teal in the background. Kind of gave it this yellow look. Well, actually, we didn't make it much teal, but we made it a little bit more yellow, making it a little bit more of a color separation. Then we went into the curves here and kind of isolated the skin colors and then just messed around with the greens in the background. You can see that everything is a little bit more green and a little bit more sort of moody. Then I wanted to make some more subjective changes, if you can say so. So we made a magic mask, and I think we need to go in and find the exact place in here to review it. I'm not even sure if it actually doesn't look like it came through. So let's just quickly show you what that did. It basically just selected my friend grid here, Shift H. You can see now what we've selected. If you select better, it's going to be even better. So basically I just adjusted her a little bit. So I gave her a little bit more contrast and just adjusted the hue a little bit. That's it. And then I made an outside node and desaturated and made the background a little bit darker. We did that in here, playing around with these different scopes. And then I just adjusted the shadows in here and the highlights up here and made it a little bit more hazy, just so it doesn't look as fake and it looks a little bit softer. And then I added some grain, and to see that, I think we need to zoom in a little bit. You can see the grain here. So that's essentially how we went from this look here to this look. And if you put it up in larger screen, we went from this log image to this. I think it's pretty beautiful. So I actually really like how this turned out. So that's what we're going through today. Just wanted to show you the grade before, and now let's head in and actually do all the steps ourselves. So first up, we're gonna grab the color space transform, that's here. And I'm just gonna duplicate, no, actually we're just gonna make it first. So from Canon Cinema Gamut and CLOG3 to Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. I'm just gonna make a new node using Command or Option S. I'm gonna copy that over here. I'm just gonna change the parameters here. So Davinci Wide Gamut, Davinci Intermediate to Rec.709 and Gamma 2.4. All right, so now we have our image. Let's just make a couple of notes here. So this is for our color correction. These will be our two for our color grading, and then we're gonna make our masks down here. So just making a lot of notes so that we have our tree. And we might as well just rename them all immediately. So CST, Davinci White Gamut, and this is CST Rec.709. This is gonna be our contrast. This is gonna be our contrast separation. This is gonna be our exposure. This is gonna be our temperature. There we go. This is gonna be our primaries, hue curve, then we can see it. It's gonna be our subject mask. It's gonna be our shadow, work, and highlight. Okay, so now we're ready to go. We have our conversion from log. So let's just jump in and make some contrast here. And just, you can see it's very flat image still, even though we converted it to Rec.709. So I'm trying to stretch it out a little bit here, give it some more contrast. I think this is a pretty good starting point, just giving it a lot more contrast here. Jumping into the exposure, I just want to play around and drag down the lift here. I want to separate it a little bit more, like so. I think around here, maybe pulling up the gamma a little bit as well. Going down the lift. I think we're starting to be in a pretty good spot here. Maybe the gamma up a little bit more, like so. I think that's pretty good. Temperature, it's looking a little bit more magenta, so I'm gonna drag it towards the greener side. And now it's a little bit too green, so let's just see if going to around 50 in the color temperature here. It still is a little bit too green, but let's see when we add the contrast separation here with the colors. I think that's gonna fix it. If I'm going a little bit fast, go slower, go back and forth, it's to make sure that this video is not taking ages, but just to break down the edit as well. So I'm splitting up my channels here on node 4 and I'm unlinking them. So I'm choosing the blue one first. And by holding down Option, I can drag this blue dot along the line here. So I'm just gonna drag it up somewhere here. And then I'm gonna drag up the blue and you can see how the image shifts. Don't worry, that's all good. Then the greens, holding down Option again, dragging it down, pulling up the greens a little bit. Now it's a little bit more teal in the background, especially in the shadows here. And then for the reds are a little bit more sensitive. So dragging a point around here and then just warming it up a little bit like such. And this these parameters here is now set to 100. That means maximum range, whatever you want to say. 50 is 0. So we're going to put it to 60 here and then around 80 on the other two, just to make it a little bit more subtle. And now I think we have a pretty clean image. And even though we had a little bit too much green before, I think that's kind of fixed now. Might still be a little bit too green actually. So let's just try and dial it back a little bit. So maybe around 6 or 5. I think here around 5 it's better. So let's keep it here. What we did with the color correction here, basically we went from this. This is the converted Rec.709 footage. And now it looks like this. This is a pretty clean image, and this looks almost as it did in real life, with a little bit of a tweak here with the colors, but that's just to warm it up and separate the colors a little bit more. See, we warmed up the background and made it a little bit more teal and blue in the shadows here. But that's basically just it to give it a little bit more color. Now let's head into the primaries, and for this one, I think we want to go around 2 for both the green and the blue. And then -1 for the reds. So now it's very green, this image. And I want the tones back here to be a little bit more green. Then we're gonna counter it and do the opposite here. So just gonna drag it down. And that gives us a little bit more of a yellow look now, but also a little bit, you can see now it's turned off. A little bit of a warmer and a little bit more saturated in the colors in the skin here. I think that's okay for now. So it's just to give it a little bit more separation. Now in the hue curve, gonna jump in here. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lock in all the skin tones. So I'm just gonna drag on the skin tones here in all the different channels, both for the hue, for the saturation, and for the luminance. And what does this do? Well, it makes sure that we have a dot in the middle where the skin tones are, and then it makes 2 dots on the edges of where the color range is. So now when I go in and I wanna adjust something else, let's say everything else in the image, it doesn't touch the skin tones at all. You can see that's the only thing that's not moving. Now, I don't want to do exactly like that, so I just want to have kind of like our green tones here. I just want to drag them down a little bit towards the greens. And for the saturation, I actually want to desaturate them quite a bit. So I'm just going to drag down saturation here, like so. And for this one particularly, I want the dress to make sure that that's white. So I'm just going to drag down this one actually, just to make sure that it's a little bit desaturated here on the blue side as well. And you can see it just helps a little bit. This, by the way, I'm desaturating the background here to make the subject, our subject here, stand out a lot more, and now also to make all the other colors a little bit more cohesive. So now everything is a little bit more green. As we're dragging it down, we're dragging it actually towards the greens. So you can see, because I have my histogram output set, or my histogram set to output, you can see how the colors shift. So when I drag it down, you can see all the tones here, they shift towards the greener side. If I dragged it up, it would shift towards the yellow side. I don't think that looks very good for this image, so we're just going to drag it back down here. And then for the luminance, don't want to touch the dress particularly, but I just want to make it a little bit darker. It doesn't affect that much. Now she really stands out from the rest of the image here. And now it's where we go in and make more of our tweaks. So this is what we did with the colors. Basically just made her stand out a little bit more and made all the background colors a little bit more sort of green. So I think I want to show you two techniques for the masking, but I'm going to show you the way that I did it first, and then I can show you a trick to do it if you only have the free version afterwards. So I use the magic mask, and because I usually do a separation of, like, I split the clip so I can show the different grades, I usually mask out in the end so that I can make sure that the mask is able to do it when I cut the clip. So that's just a way to tell you that, but for this one, it doesn't really matter that much. So I'm just going to drag on her, and usually it doesn't do a perfect job first. So I need to pull in the arms here as well. So just dragging somewhat of a line, doing it for the arms here as well. And when I click Shift H, you can see now it's perfectly selected her. The faster option usually does a little bit of a more like harsh job. So I'm just going to click better. And that usually just softens out the edges a little bit. So now we have her selected. And what I want to do is I want to go into my curve here. I want to make sure that it's linked again. So I have the white line. I just want to drag down the shadows a little bit, very, very little, and then drag up my highlights. What you can see is just it creates a little bit more contrast on her. Very subtle, but you can actually see it's kind of a huge difference now. But it is still very subtle, and I almost did nothing. It doesn't have to be perfect with the points or anything, but I like to do that. It really makes a difference. I actually want to change the skin tones a little bit as well. So I'm just going to mark the skin tones here. I'm just going to drag them down a little bit in the hue, just to make it a little bit more of a normal color. So somewhere around here, I think looks pretty good. So that's what I want to do for her there. And then I'm going to make an outside node. So add a node, outside node. Now that basically just means it selects everything but her. So if we go in here and make sure that we are on the clip here, if I click Shift H, now we are on the first node that we made. Now you can see she is selected. If I go to this one, everything else is selected. And that's exactly what I want from this. If I go to another frame, it won't work because we haven't rendered out this look right now. We need to drag it all the way through. We haven't done that right now. So what I want to do here is I want to desaturate the background quite a bit. So I'm going to go into my saturation here, my luminance versus saturation. I'm just going to drag down here and see what happens. We can make it all black and white. That's not what I want. I think this looks very fake, although it looks pretty cool. That wouldn't be realistic, would it? It could be a look, but I think that's what I'm going to go with. So I'm just going to drag it down a little bit. Now it's more desaturated, definitely. Go into the sat versus sat and just make sure that we have less saturation here as well. Perfect. And then I'm going to go into the sat versus luminance, which is the darkest parts here and the lightest part. I'm just going to make sure that it's a little bit darker. I'm going to try and drag up the highlights here as well, just a little bit, and then not as much, I can see. So something like this, and then we might go back in here, just give it a little bit of saturation back again, because I don't want it to look unrealistic. I just want it to blend in kind of nice. But you can actually see now, I think it looks pretty good. I think it looks pretty realistic. She just stands out. The colors are not unnatural. They are a little bit teal, but I like that look. You could just have done different adjustments earlier, but you can see it's a big difference. It makes it darker and it makes it stand out a lot more. Now, the issue with using this mask is that these green tones in here can become a problem in a bit when we track. There's a way to try and work around that, but it doesn't always work perfectly nice. So this is what I want to do for my subject mask here. Let me show you in a second how we can also go around that, but let's just finish the grade first. So for the shadows, that is kind of just to like my personal touch. I like to play around with the light a little bit. So for this instance, I want the light to come from the right side. So I'm just going to drag a rectangular mask out here. Click Shift H to see what we're doing. It's okay that we are touching her arm a little bit. Just going to drag down the gamma to around 10. That's okay. I'm going to go into my curves again and just going to soften it up a little bit and then drag down the shadows as well. Just to give it this kind of darker look in the shadows over here. Completely personal preference. I just think it draws in the attention to her a little bit more. It kind of, because she's so light or bright and this is the darker area and it's more in the background, I think it looks pretty great. And then for the highlights, I want to do sort of the opposite, but I want to emulate the sun a little bit more. So we're going to make a circular power window. I'm going to drag this out. And I think we actually want to do it like this. Click Shift H, see what we're doing. And just going to soften this up to 100. That's definitely too much. 75 maybe. 50. Yeah, 50 is pretty good. Actually, maybe 60. Yeah, we want to touch upon her a little bit as well. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag up the gamma. Like so, and then I'm gonna make it more yellow. So I'm gonna drag up the red channel a little bit more and then the green channel a little bit as well. Now it's very soft, a little bit more yellowish, kind of emulating the sun, but still soft. I think this looks pretty good, but what I like to do is I'm gonna make another node in here. Look at how it's still the outside node is also connected to the blue dot here, making sure that it masks it correctly, and everything is being mixed together in a layer here. So what I want to do here is I want to actually go in and take the dehaze, which is from the name of it, meant to actually dehaze the subject. So if you have haze, that will do that. Now I just dehazed everything, but if I connect the two blue dots here, the alpha mask, it will only dehaze this part up here. Now, why would it dehaze it? Well, I don't, but if you use this the opposite way, so I'm going to make it -0.1, then we get this very, very soft look. And you can see how that works here. It's very subtle. I don't want it to be a big change, but you can see when I turn it off and on, it just makes it a little bit more softer, kind of a little bit more hazy and dreamy. And I like that look. So that's just a technique for me to do that. The reason why I'm not doing it in this layer itself, or this node itself, and I'm doing it in a separate one and connecting the alpha mask, is because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. Kind of like what we're doing with all the nodes. We could do everything in one node, but then we can't see the difference. We can't go in and see, oh, what did the primaries do back then? Okay, it did that. So that's why I'm doing it like that. There's no other particular reason for that. The last node we want to do is the grain. So just going to pull in the film grain here. And I don't really know a lot about grain, to be honest, but I'm just going to click on the 35mm 400T. No idea what that is. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here, and I'm just going to make the grain size a little bit larger, the aspect ratio and the strength a little bit harsher. Texture, play around with that, somewhere around there. The strength, something like that. It is very subtle, you can just see, but it gives it a little bit more detail. Actually, I think this was way too much when I'm looking at it at the bigger screen, so just the strength down. But it gives it this more cinematic film kind of look, not necessarily cinematic, that's the wrong word, but the kind of grainy film look that we're all looking to do. So I think it looks pretty great. You could apply it to less or more, but for this video now, I just think you want to do that. You can especially see it down here. Maybe it was a little bit too much, but hey, it's a tutorial. You can play around with it yourself. So that's basically it. We went from this was right before we did anything at all, and this is where we're at now. So I think that looks pretty damn good. Let's just make sure that we're still in the mask. We are. So this is kind of like the biggest change in this one, these two nodes here. showing you how to just separate her as a subject a little bit more and make sure that she stands out. I like this desaturated look. I like these desaturated greens. And then against her skin tones, I think it makes a really, really nice look. Now, I did tell you that this was a way of doing it with the paid version because you have the magic mask. But if you don't have the paid version, let me show you a trick on how to do it the other way around. So I'm just going to duplicate this layer, remove video 1, which is what we just did. And then I'm actually just going to remove the mask here because we still have our outside node. I'm just going to remove that right now. So you can use it just with the power windows. So if you just kind of pull in a power window on her here and then just soften it out a little bit, maybe not as much, but something like that. You would want to maybe track it as well. Just gonna see how that looks. Turn it off, turn it on, looks pretty good. And then the only issue here now is that you can see it doesn't do a perfect job. Some of it is still not as desaturated, but it pulls in the focus here, and that's the main objective. So I think from what we did here, it still looks pretty good. We can actually try and see the difference. So I can just go in here and then we can enable video 1 again. This is what it looks like with the magic mask. Let's just remove media pool. And this is what it looks like without. So you can definitely see that there's a difference. You can see how she's perfectly selected in this one. You can see the greens in here are desaturated the way they're supposed to. And when we go in here, they're a little bit lighter. You can see there's kind of like a slight halo around her. But honestly, if we weren't looking for these things particularly, I don't think you would see them. So just to tell you that if you have the free version, that is a way to do it. And you can go in here. Now I'm going to do it, but I'm not sure it's going to work very well. So let's turn off 3D, rotation, and zoom and tilt. Actually just wanted to pan. And then see if it can figure out how to track her. So tracks it okay there. Tracks it okay here. Might actually have wanted to have zoom on, but yeah, I think it's okay. So if we click Shift H, we can just play it through. And now you can kind of see it actually tracks it pretty well. And it is a much faster way than using the magic mask, because some of the issues that we have with the magic mask is that it won't necessarily perfectly mask out the greens in here. And then we get some weird things and wobbles and stuff going around. And I don't want to render the other one now because we've already spent a lot of time on this grade. But it's just to tell you that this is a perfectly fine way to do it. As long as your changes are kind of subtle and they can mix well together, perfectly fine way to do it as well. So that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to break down this grade and I thought I could do it in 10 minutes. And now we're at 25 minutes of recording audio at least. Maybe it's a little bit shorter here on YouTube, but well, what can I do? I wanted to go through everything. I wanted to explain the grade first. So that's what we did. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching all the way through. I really appreciate it. I really hope you learned something. It's not different from what I usually do, but it's a little bit different from a lot of the other grades that I've been showing here on YouTube because it's a little bit more advanced. So if I went a little bit fast, maybe go and watch some of my other videos as well, because they might be a little bit slower or a little bit less advanced, if you want to say that. But this is to me, a pretty cool grade. I really love how it turned out, and I think we did a great job of recreating it as well. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope you have a great day, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. And until then, take care.